My mom posted photos of my therapy session notes on Facebook to get advice from her friends. I was eating breakfast when my phone started vibrating like someone was calling 911. Text after text. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. My college roommate sent a screenshot with just 3 words. Dude, what the fuck? I opened it and felt my stomach drop through the floor. There were my therapy notes, handwritten pages I'd never shown anyone, posted on my mother's Facebook wall with the caption, "Need advice from my mom friends. My son wrote these disturbing things and I'm worried. What should I do?" The post had 47 comments. 47 strangers discussing my private mental health struggles like a community potluck recipe. I'd been seeing Dr. Raymond Kellerman, a clinical psychologist with 23 years of experience, for about 8 months. Nothing dramatic, just working through some anxiety about graduate school applications, processing my parents' divorce from 3 years ago, and dealing with the normal pressures of being 24 and trying to figure out my life. Dr. Kellerman encouraged journaling between sessions, and I kept a notebook where I wrote out thoughts and feelings to discuss during our weekly appointments. Private thoughts, raw thoughts. The kind of unfiltered internal dialogue you never expect another human being to see, let alone 400 of your mother's Facebook friends. The notebook had been in my apartment. I lived alone in a studio about 20 minutes from my childhood home, where my mom still lived after the divorce. I'd visit her maybe twice a month for dinner, trying to maintain some relationship despite the growing distance I'd felt since she and Dad split. She had a key to my place for emergencies. I'd given it to her when I first moved in, back when I still trusted her with that kind of access. Looking at those screenshots, I realized she must have come into my apartment when I wasn't home, gone through my things, found the notebook, photographed the pages, and decided that posting them publicly was an appropriate response to whatever she'd read there. The comments were worse than I'd imagined. People were diagnosing me with serious psychiatric conditions based on fragments. "Sounds like bipolar disorder," one woman wrote. Someone named Helen commented, "You need to get him committed before he hurts himself or others." I even saw comments from distant relatives. "I always thought he was a little off," someone wrote. My face burned with humiliation. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I tried calling her immediately. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text. "Take that post down right now." No response. I opened Facebook myself. I barely used it anymore, but I still had an account, and found her profile. The post was public. Not just friends only, public. Anyone with an internet connection could see pages of my private therapy notes. I could see the comments loading in real time. Her friend Deborah had written, "Oh honey, this sounds serious. Have you thought about hospitalization?" Another woman named Patricia. "My nephew wrote things like this before his breakdown. You need to act fast." I wasn't suicidal. I wasn't dangerous. I was anxious about career choices and processing complicated feelings about my parents' divorce. I'd written things like, "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in expectations, and I don't know if I'll ever feel like I'm enough." Normal therapy processing, normal human vulnerability. And now hundreds of people were reading it, analyzing it, diagnosing me, recommending psychiatric intervention based on out-of-context fragments of my private therapeutic work. I felt violated in a way I couldn't articulate. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was deeper. Like someone had reached inside my chest and yanked out something essential. I grabbed my keys and drove to her house. It was 8:30 in the morning on a Sunday. I didn't care. I hammered on her front door until she opened it, still in her bathrobe, looking confused by my urgency. "Why are you pounding like that?" she asked, as if I was being unreasonable. I held up my phone showing her Facebook post. "Take it down," I said. My voice was shaking. "Take it down right now." She looked at the screen and then at me with this expression of wounded innocence. "I was worried about you," she said. "I found that notebook, and some of the things you wrote scared me. I needed advice from other mothers." "When did you take these photos?" I demanded. She hesitated. "Last week. I came by to drop off groceries and you weren't home. I saw the notebook on your desk." My desk. My private apartment. I felt sick. "You had no right. People I know are seeing this. My professors might see this." She became defensive. "If you're embarrassed by what you wrote, maybe you shouldn't have written it. I need to know if you're in crisis." I almost laughed. "I'm not in crisis. I'm in therapy. Those notes are supposed to be private, and now you've made it impossible for me to ever feel safe writing anything down again." "Those are private therapy notes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You broke into my apartment, went through my personal belongings, and posted my medical information online. Do you understand what you've done?" She stepped back like I'd slapped her. "I didn't break in. I have a key, and I'm your mother. I have a right to know if you're struggling." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "No," I said. "You don't. Not like this. Take the post down." She crossed her arms. "I will not. I asked for advice and I'm getting it. If you're upset, maybe that tells you something about what you wrote." I stood there on her porch, staring at this woman who'd raised me, and realized I was looking at a stranger. Someone who could violate my privacy this completely and then blame me for being upset about it. I got back in my car and drove home, my mind racing. I needed to think strategically. I needed help. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was a potential legal issue. Those notes contained protected health information. My therapy work was confidential. What she'd done couldn't possibly be legal. First, I called Dr. Kellerman's emergency line. It was Sunday, but this qualified as an emergency. He called me back within 15 minutes. I explained what happened, my words tumbling over each other. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he said, in a voice tight with controlled anger, "She posted photographs of your therapy notes on social media without your consent?" I confirmed. He was silent again. "This is a serious breach, not just of your privacy use of therapeutic confidentiality. I need to document this. Can you send me screenshots of her post?" I sent him everything. The original post, the comments, the timestamp. He called me back 20 minutes later. "I've consulted with our clinic's legal team. What your mother did is potentially actionable. Those notes, even though you wrote them yourself, are part of your protected health information. They're connected to your treatment. She had no right to share them, especially not publicly. I'm advising you to contact an attorney who specializes in privacy law and possibly HIPAA violations. I'm also going to file a report with the state licensing board about this incident because it impacts the integrity of the therapeutic relationship." That's when it hit me how serious this was. Dr. Kellerman wasn't just sympathetic. He was treating this like a legal incident. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't just me being sensitive. A licensed clinical psychologist with over 2 decades of experience was telling me that what my mother did was a legitimate violation. I asked him if he could recommend an attorney. He gave me 3 names. I called the first one, Janet Kowalski, a privacy rights attorney who'd practiced for 19 years and had handled several high-profile cases involving medical information breaches. Her assistant said she could see me Monday morning for a consultation. By Sunday afternoon, my mom's post had over 100 comments and had been shared 16 times. 16 times. My private therapy notes were spreading across Facebook like a virus. I kept refreshing the page, watching in horror as more people weighed in. Some comments were well-meaning but misguided. Others were cruel. Someone named Lisa wrote, "This generation is so soft. In my day, we just dealt with our problems." Another person, Jeffrey, commented, "Sounds like attention-seeking behavior. I'd cut off his access to money until he grows up." These were complete strangers making judgments about my mental health, my character, my worth as a person, based on fragments of private therapeutic processing. Friends started contacting me after seeing the post. My roommate Kevin called, "This is fucked up. Are you okay?" I wasn't, but I said I was handling it. The worst was when my graduate school advisor emailed about seeing something concerning online. When we met, he was direct about the Facebook post. I explained I was taking legal action. His validation, that my therapy notes looked normal and my mother's behavior was concerning, meant everything. I couldn't eat. I tried to work on a grad school application I'd been putting together, but I couldn't focus. Every few minutes I'd check Facebook again, watching the comments multiply. I felt exposed in a way that was almost physical, like I was standing naked in a crowded room while people pointed and whispered. I'd been making good progress in therapy. I'd been opening up, being vulnerable, doing the hard work of examining my patterns and fears. And now all of that felt contaminated. How could I ever write freely in a therapy journal again? How could I trust that my private thoughts would stay private? Sleep became impossible. Sunday night, I lay awake, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Around 3 a.m., I started documenting everything. Screenshots of every comment, timestamps, everyone who'd contacted me. Monday, I called in sick to work. The anxiety was physical, tight chest, shaking hands, feeling like I couldn't breathe. Dr. Kellerman later explained these were panic attacks triggered by exposure trauma. I stopped checking social media after a few days. Too triggering. But the uncertainty of not knowing if it was still spreading felt worse. Nightmares started. Always themes of exposure and surveillance. My subconscious processing the violation through symbols. I became hypervigilant, hiding anything I wrote, obsessively checking locks, feeling anxious about leaving personal items visible. Monday morning, I met with Janet Kowalski. Her office was downtown, modern and professional. She was a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I showed her everything, screenshots of the post, copies of my therapy intake forms that established confidentiality, text exchanges with my mother, even the lease agreement for my apartment showing that it was my residence and she was only authorized for emergency access. She took notes as I talked, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and folded her hands. "This is one of the more egregious privacy violations I've seen," she said. "Your mother accessed your private residence without permission. You gave her a key for emergencies, not for unrestricted entry." She took photographs of medical information. "Those therapy notes are linked to your treatment and fall under privacy protections." She then published that information publicly without your consent. There are several potential causes of action here. Invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, possibly even violations of state medical privacy statutes. She paused. "Has she taken the post down?" I shook my head. "She refuses. She thinks she did nothing wrong." Janet's expression hardened. "Then we escalate. I'm going to draft a cease and desist letter demanding immediate removal of the post and all copies. I'm also going to send a letter to Facebook's legal team demanding removal under their privacy policies, and I'm going to advise you to file a police report for unauthorized entry to your residence. I blinked. A police report? Against my mother? She nodded. Yes. What she did wasn't just morally wrong. It was illegal. She entered your home without permission, accessed private documents, and disseminated confidential information. If you want this taken seriously, you need to document it through official channels. I left her office feeling both validated and terrified. This was moving fast, but she was right. If I didn't take serious action, my mother would never understand the magnitude of what she'd done. By Monday afternoon, I'd filed a police report with Officer Dennis Riggs, a 10-year veteran of the local department who took detailed notes and photographs of all my evidence. He seemed genuinely concerned. Parents sometimes think they have unlimited rights to their adult children's information, he said. They don't. You're 24. You have the same privacy rights as any adult. What she did constitutes unlawful entry and potentially theft. She took images of your property without permission. Officer Riggs spent nearly 2 hours with me, documenting everything methodically. He photographed the post, copied my lease agreement, and took detailed statements. I'm filing this as unauthorized entry and theft of digital information, he explained. Having this on record is important. It establishes a paper trail and strengthens your civil case. He also asked about other boundary violations, and I told him about the times she'd shown up unannounced and opened my mail. The cease and desist letter went out Monday evening via certified mail. Tuesday morning, Facebook removed the post after Janet's office filed a formal privacy complaint. But by then, screenshots had been taken. The post had been shared. My therapy notes were still out there, circulating in unknown corners of the internet. I felt like I was fighting a forest fire with a water pistol. My mother called me Tuesday afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message. Her voice was cold, clipped. I received a threatening letter from your lawyer. I can't believe you're doing this. I'm your mother. I was worried about you. This is how you repay me? By threatening legal action? I saved the voicemail. Janet had told me to document everything, every text, every call, every interaction. I was building a case, even though part of me still couldn't believe I was building a case against my own mother. Wednesday, she showed up at my apartment. I watched through the peephole as she knocked, then rang the bell, then knocked again louder. I didn't open the door. She called out, "I know you're in there. We need to talk about this." I stayed silent. After 5 minutes, she left. I immediately called a locksmith and had all the locks changed. I wasn't taking chances anymore. Thursday, I had my regular therapy session with Dr. Kellerman. I'd considered canceling. I felt too raw, too exposed, but he'd encouraged me to come in. We spent the hour processing what had happened. He was clear that what my mother had done was a profound betrayal of trust. She violated multiple boundaries, he explained. Physical boundaries by entering your space, privacy boundaries by accessing your notes, relational boundaries by involving strangers in your private health matters. And then, when you confronted her, she refused accountability and blamed you for your reaction. That's textbook boundary violation, followed by gaslighting. I keep thinking I'm overreacting, I admitted. She's my mom. Maybe she was just worried. Doctor, Kellerman shook his head firmly. Worry doesn't justify violation. A parent who's genuinely concerned has appropriate options, calling you, suggesting you increase therapy frequency, offering support. What she did wasn't about concern. It was about control. She wanted access to your inner world, and when you didn't volunteer it, she took it by force. Then she weaponized it by making it public. That session gave me clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being dramatic. I'd been violated, and I had every right to be upset. Dr. Kellerman also informed me that he'd filed his report with the state board, explaining how the breach of my therapy notes could have a chilling effect on my treatment and on the therapeutic relationship in general. Clients need to know their work in therapy is sacred space, he said. When that's violated, it damages not just your therapy, but potentially your willingness to ever be vulnerable in treatment again. Friday afternoon, my father called. My father. I hadn't spoken to him much since the divorce. He'd moved 2 states away for a job and we'd drifted, but he'd apparently heard about what happened through the family grapevine. Your mother told me you're suing her, he said, his voice tight. I corrected him. I sent her a cease and desist. She posted my private therapy notes on Facebook. There was a long silence. She did what? I explained everything. Another silence. Then, Jesus Christ, that's insane. I'm sorry, I don't even know what to say. Did you know she was capable of something like this? I asked. He sighed. Your mother has always struggled with boundaries. It's part of why we divorced. She couldn't accept that I had parts of my life that weren't her business. But this is next level. He paused. What are you going to do? I told him about the attorney, the police report, the potential lawsuit if she didn't comply with the cease and desist. Good, he said. Don't back down. She needs to learn she can't do this to people. The cease and desist gave my mother 10 days to respond. 10 days to acknowledge the violation, agree to cease all sharing of my information, and agree to counseling about boundaries and privacy. If she didn't comply, we'd file a formal lawsuit. I spent those 10 days in a strange limbo. I couldn't focus on grad school applications. I couldn't sleep properly. I kept having this recurring nightmare where I was in a glass room and people were walking by, reading papers about me, discussing me, while I pounded on the glass trying to make them stop. Day 8, my mother's attorney responded. She'd hired someone, Gerald Beaumont, a family law attorney with 16 years of experience. His letter was dismissive and aggressive. It claimed my mother had acted out of reasonable parental concern and had a right to access my concerning writings. It accused me of being emotionally unstable and suggested that my lawsuit threat was evidence of ongoing mental health crisis. It demanded I drop all claims and threatened a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress if I continued. I forwarded it to Janet. She called me within an hour, and she was angry. "This is a garbage legal argument," she said flatly. "There's no such thing as reasonable parental concern that permits an adult child's privacy to be violated. You're not a minor. Her attorney is grasping at straws and trying to intimidate you." She paused. "Here's what's going to happen. We're filing suit. We're suing for invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of state privacy statutes. We're seeking damages for therapy costs, emotional harm, and punitive damages to send a message that this behavior is unacceptable." The lawsuit was filed on day 12. The local news picked up the story that same week, not naming me specifically, but reporting on a local man suing parent for posting therapy notes online. The article quoted privacy experts who said it was a landmark case about digital age boundaries between parents and adult children. Suddenly, I was getting messages from journalists wanting interviews. Dr. Kellerman advised me not to speak publicly until after the case resolved. "Let the legal process work," he said. The next 3 months were brutal. My mother's attorney tried multiple tactics to dismiss the case. They argued I had no standing because I'd written the notes myself. Judge Catherine Fleming, a 12-year veteran of the circuit court, rejected that argument in a written opinion. The plaintiff's authorship of the notes does not vitiate his privacy interest in them, particularly when they were created as part of confidential medical treatment. They argued that since Facebook had removed the post, there was no ongoing harm. Judge Fleming rejected that too. The dissemination had already occurred. The harm is not erased by belated removal. During discovery, things got worse. My mother's attorney demanded access to all my therapy records, claiming they were relevant to prove I was mentally unstable and that she'd had legitimate cause for concern. Janet filed a motion to quash the subpoena, arguing that my mental health records were privileged and not relevant to whether my mother had violated my privacy. The judge agreed with Janet, but allowed limited discovery. My mother had to produce all communications where she'd discussed my therapy notes with others, and all evidence of how she'd accessed my apartment. What came back was damning. Email chains where she'd discussed spying on me to find out what he's really thinking. Text messages with her sister where she'd said, "He won't tell me about therapy, so I'll find out myself." Evidence that she'd come to my apartment on at least 4 separate occasions when I wasn't home, going through my belongings. Not just the notebook, she'd photographed other personal documents too. My bank statements, medical records from a doctor's appointment, even pages from a personal journal I'd kept separate from therapy notes. There were also text messages discussing me with her friend Carolyn from church, messages where my mother complained I was distant and secretive. Carolyn suggested talking to me directly. My mother's response, "I've tried. He just says everything is fine, but I can tell it's not." The presumption that my privacy was inherently suspicious made my skin crawl. The most disturbing discovery was a folder on my mother's computer labeled Connor's Life. It contained dozens of photographs, bank statements, social media screenshots, receipts from my trash, a credit card bill with, "What is he buying?" written in the margin. She'd even been monitoring my friends' accounts to track my activities. Under one photo of me at a party, she'd written, "Why wasn't I invited?" It was someone she'd never met. Janet presented this evidence in a motion for summary judgment. The defendant engaged in a systematic campaign of surveillance and privacy invasion against her adult son, the motion read. This was not a one-time act of concern. This was a pattern of deliberate boundary violations. Judge Fleming scheduled a hearing. I had to testify. I was terrified. I'd never been in court before, and now I'd be testifying against my own mother. The hearing was in late October, 6 months after the original Facebook post. I sat in the witness box and answered Janet's questions. Yes, I'd given my mother a key for emergencies only. No, I had not given her permission to enter when I wasn't home. No, I had not given her permission to photograph my personal documents. Yes, I had explicitly told her that therapy was private and I didn't want to discuss it with her. My mother sat at the defense table, staring at me with an expression that cycled between hurt, anger, and something that looked like betrayal. Her attorney cross-examined me aggressively. Didn't I have a history of anxiety? Hadn't I written concerning things in those notes? Didn't I think a mother had a right to be worried? Janet objected repeatedly. The question isn't whether the plaintiff has anxiety. The question is whether the defendant had the right to violate his privacy. She did not. Judge Fleming sustained most of Janet's objections. My mother's attorney was trying to put my mental health on trial, and the judge wasn't allowing it. But the attorney persisted. "Mr. Abbott, isn't it true that you've been distant from your mother since the divorce?" I answered carefully. "I've maintained regular contact. I visited approximately twice a month. He pressed. But you didn't tell her about your therapy, did you? I kept my voice steady. Therapy is confidential. I don't discuss my medical treatment with anyone unless I choose to. So you were keeping secrets from her, he said triumphantly. Janet objected immediately. Argumentative. Privacy is not secrecy. Judge Fleming sustained it. The attorney tried reading from my notebook. I don't know if I'll ever be enough. Doesn't that sound like someone in crisis? I felt exposed hearing my private words in court. That's a thought I was processing in therapy. Taken out of context, therapy work sounds concerning. That's why it's supposed to remain private. The cross-examination lasted 45 minutes of trying to paint me as secretive and troubled. By the end, even Judge Fleming looked irritated. Counselor, we've established the plaintiff is an adult with privacy rights. Move on or conclude your examination. My mother testified too. She cried on the stand. She said she'd only wanted to help. She'd been scared by what she read. She'd thought her Facebook friends, many of whom were mothers or worked in healthcare, could give her advice. She hadn't understood that it was a violation. She'd truly believed she was doing the right thing. Her attorney asked, "Do you regret what you did?" She looked directly at me and said, "I regret that my son has made me into a villain for caring about him." Janet's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Abbott, your emails indicate you entered your son's apartment 4 times specifically to find out what he's really thinking. Is that correct?" My mother shifted uncomfortably. "I was concerned about him." Janet held up evidence. "You photographed bank statements, medical bills, credit card statements, journal pages. Would you call that concern or surveillance?" "I needed to understand what was going on in his life," my mother said defensively. "He wouldn't talk to me." Janet seized on that. "So you believe being his mother gives you the right to enter his home without permission and photograph his private documents?" My mother hesitated. He gave me a key." Janet clarified. "For emergencies. Was there an actual emergency on any of these occasions?" Silence. Janet read from an email. "He'll always be my baby. Parents don't stop parenting just because kids turn 18. She looked at my mother. "Does your son have any right to privacy from you?" The answer was barely audible. "Not if I think something is wrong." Janet's final question. "You said you regret that your son made you into a villain. Do you regret posting his private therapy notes online?" My mother looked at me. "I regret how much he's hurt by it, but I don't regret trying to help him." That answer sealed it. Even under oath, she couldn't say she regretted the actual act. That answer told me everything. Even now, even after months of legal proceedings and expert testimony about privacy rights, she couldn't acknowledge that what she'd done was wrong. She could only frame herself as the victim of my overreaction. Janet's closing argument was powerful. She walked through every element of invasion of privacy and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She cited the evidence of systematic surveillance. She noted that my mother had never apologized, never taken responsibility, never shown any genuine remorse. "This isn't about a mother's concern," Janet said. "This is about control. When the defendant couldn't control her adult son's choices, she took his privacy by force." Judge Fleming took 2 weeks to issue her ruling. When it came, it was comprehensive and unsparing. She found in my favor on all counts. She awarded me $45,000 in damages, $15,000 for therapy costs past and future, $20,000 for emotional distress, and $10,000 in punitive damages. But more than the money, her written opinion mattered. "Parents do not have unlimited access to their adult children's lives," she wrote. The defendant's actions were not those of a concerned parent, but of someone who refused to respect her son's autonomy, privacy, and dignity. Her continued refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, demonstrates a profound lack of respect for boundaries. Judge Fleming's opinion was 32 pages and comprehensive. She systematically dismantled every argument my mother's attorney had made. On my standing to sue, the plaintiff's authorship doesn't diminish his privacy interest. These notes were created as part of confidential medical treatment. On parental concern, however genuine, does not override an adult child's right to privacy. The defendant had appropriate options: direct communication, consultation with her own therapist, emergency intervention. She chose covert surveillance and public disclosure instead. The opinion addressed the pattern of behavior revealed in discovery and cited legal precedent establishing that adult children have full privacy rights, regardless of familial relationships. Most powerfully, it detailed the harm caused: panic attacks, nightmares, compromised ability to engage in therapy, reputational harm, and loss of trust in a foundational relationship. The conclusion was unusually strong for a civil case. This represents a cautionary tale about technology, privacy, and family relationships. Parents must understand that their adult children are autonomous individuals with full privacy rights. Love does not grant access. Concern does not justify invasion. The ruling made local news again. This time, several media outlets reached out for comment. Janet advised me carefully about what to say. I gave one interview to a local journalist, Rebecca Thornton, who'd been covering privacy issues for 8 years. I didn't trash my mother. I focused on the broader principle. Adult children have the same privacy rights as any other adults, I said. Parental concern doesn't override those rights. I hope this case helps other people understand that boundaries matter, even within families. My mother never paid the judgment. She filed for bankruptcy 6 months later, claiming she couldn't afford it. Janet told me I could challenge the bankruptcy discharge, but I decided not to pursue it. The money had never been the point. The point was the validation. The point was a judge saying clearly, in writing, that what she'd done was wrong, that I wasn't overreacting, that my privacy mattered. It's been a year now. I'm in graduate school. I got accepted to a program in clinical psychology, actually, partly inspired by Dr. Kellerman, who stood by me through the whole nightmare. I haven't spoken to my mother since the trial. She sends cards sometimes, birthday, Christmas, but I don't open them. Maybe someday I'll be ready to revisit that relationship, but not now. Not while she still can't acknowledge what she did. Therapy has been crucial. Dr. Kellerman and I have spent a lot of time processing the betrayal, working through my trust issues, examining how the violation affected my sense of safety. It's slow work. Some days I still feel that glass room exposure, that sense of being watched and judged. But it's getting better. I'm getting better. I've learned something important. You can love someone and still set boundaries. You can respect yourself enough to walk away from people who won't respect you, even if they're family. One particularly difficult session came about 3 months after the trial. I'd been having nightmares, always the same theme of exposure and surveillance. Dr. Kellerman helped me understand that trauma doesn't always look dramatic. Your mother violated something sacred, he explained. She invaded the space where you were supposed to be completely yourself. That's profound trauma, and it takes time to rebuild that sense of safety. We did extensive work around trust and vulnerability. How do you trust again when someone who should have protected you betrayed you? Dr. Kellerman introduced the concept of earned trust, that trust isn't given blindly based on relationship roles, but earned through consistent, respectful behavior. My mother had violated earned trust, and any future relationship would have to rebuild from zero. My father and I talk more now. He's been supportive throughout this whole thing. Your mother has a lot of good qualities, he told me once, but she never learned where she ended and other people began. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I wish I'd done it sooner. We're rebuilding something. It's different than before the divorce, but it's honest. He told me about their couples therapy attempts, how therapists tried to talk to her about boundaries and enmeshment. She'd justify it as love, he said. Eventually, I realized she didn't think she was doing anything wrong. The most unexpected outcome has been the messages. After the news coverage, I got dozens of emails and DMs from other people, mostly young adults, who'd experienced similar violations from parents. People whose parents read their diaries, accessed their medical records without permission, monitored their phones and computers into adulthood, shared their private information with extended family or on social media. So many people who felt gaslit and crazy for being upset about it. I responded to every single one. I told them they weren't overreacting. I told them their privacy mattered. One message came from a woman whose mother had posted about her abortion on Facebook. She'd felt crazy for being angry. My case validated her. Another was from a man whose father had installed tracking software and ambushed his therapist. His family turned against him when he pressed charges. I spent hours responding, sharing what I'd learned. Privacy violations by parents get minimized, but adult children have full privacy rights regardless of family. Dr. Felicia Morgan, a family therapist with 28 years of experience, asked if I'd speak on a panel about boundaries. I agreed. The hardest messages were from teenagers with controlling parents who couldn't wait to turn 18. I directed them to resources about privacy rights and preparing for independence. Not all responses were supportive. I got hate mail calling me ungrateful and cruel. Parents have a right to protect their children, one wrote. These messages revealed exactly the mindset I was fighting against, that parenting is ownership rather than stewardship. Some people think I'm cold for not reconciling with my mother. Extended family members have tried to intervene, suggesting I'm throwing away a relationship over one mistake. But it wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern. It was her refusal to take accountability. It was her choice to prioritize her need for control over my fundamental right to privacy. And it was her decision, even after a judge ruled against her, to paint herself as the victim. My Aunt Claire called me about 2 months after the trial. After pleasantries, she shifted to her real agenda. Your mother is devastated. She misses you. Don't you think you've punished her enough? Family is supposed to forgive. I took a breath. She didn't just make a mistake. She systematically invaded my privacy over months. When I asked her to take the post down, she refused. Even in court, she couldn't admit she'd done anything wrong. How do you forgive someone who won't acknowledge they hurt you? Claire sighed. She's from a different generation. She was just concerned. I felt my jaw tighten. This isn't generational. This is about basic respect. Would you want your private medical information posted online? Claire never really understood. The conversation ended with promises to visit my grandmother, promises I kept, carefully scheduling when my mother wouldn't be there. I don't hate my mother. I mostly feel sad for her. Sad that she couldn't respect me enough to let me have private thoughts. Sad that she valued public validation from Facebook strangers over my trust. Sad that even when confronted with the legal and emotional consequences of her actions, she couldn't find it in herself to say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Maybe someday she'll do that work. maybe someday we'll talk again. But it has to be on terms that respect my autonomy. For now, I'm focused on my own healing and my own future. I'm learning to be vulnerable again in therapy without fear that it'll be weaponized. I'm building relationships with people who understand consent and boundaries. I'm studying to become a therapist myself, specifically focused on family systems and boundaries. I want to help other people navigate these complicated dynamics, set healthy limits, and recognize when concern has become control. Graduate school has been transformative. My clinical psychology program emphasizes ethics and boundaries. I've learned terms for what happened: enmeshment, triangulation, emotional control. My professor, Dr. Angela Torres, explained, "Your mother couldn't differentiate between her needs and yours. She experienced your independence as rejection, your privacy as secrecy." I've started practice therapy sessions. My first client dealt with family boundary issues. Her mother accessed her text messages. I helped her process the violation while maintaining professional boundaries about my own experience. I've also become involved in advocacy work, giving talks about privacy rights and helping draft proposed legislation. I attend a monthly support group for adults with boundary-violating parents. Hearing others' stories reminds me I'm not alone. We share strategies, validate each other, celebrate victories. The group has been crucial to my recovery. The night the judgment came through, I sat in my apartment, the one with new locks, the one my mother had violated, and I cried. Not sad tears, relief tears, validation tears. A judge had seen the evidence and said, "You were right. You deserve privacy. You deserve respect. Your boundaries matter." It sounds simple, but after months of being told I was overreacting, being dramatic, destroying a relationship over nothing, those words in that legal document meant everything. I still have the therapy notebook. I've never written in it again. I use a digital encrypted journal now, but I keep it as a reminder of what I survived, a reminder of what I learned, a reminder that even when people you love violate you, you can still stand up for yourself. You can still say, "This isn't acceptable," and mean it, even when they refuse to listen. If you're reading this and you've experienced something similar, a parent who couldn't respect your boundaries, who violated your privacy, who made you feel crazy for being upset about it, I want you to know, you're not crazy. Your feelings are valid. You have the right to privacy, even from family, especially from family. Love doesn't grant unlimited access to someone else's inner world. Concern doesn't justify violation. Some bridges are worth burning if they're being used to invade your territory. My mother built a bridge into my private life without permission, and I had to burn it to protect myself. I don't regret that. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that she never understood why it was necessary. But I don't regret protecting myself. There are still hard days. Days when I see mothers and adult children having easy relationships and feel jealous. Days when I wonder if I was too harsh. Days when I miss having a mother, even knowing the mother I miss never really existed. Dr. Kellerman helps me sit with that grief. "You're mourning multiple things," he's explained. "The mother you wish you'd had, the relationship you hope to build, the fantasy of family our culture promises. All of that grief is valid, even as you maintain boundaries. The holidays are hard. They used to mean family gatherings. Now they mean navigating questions about why I'm not there. Dad and I have started our own traditions. Movies on Christmas, dinner at restaurants, keeping things low-key. It's different, but peaceful. No surveillance, no wondering what will be made public next. I've had to reframe my understanding of family. Family isn't just blood. My close friends have become family, showing me what healthy boundaries look like. Dating has been complicated. I'm hyper-aware of boundary issues in partners. I once ended things with someone who constantly checked in, got anxious if I didn't respond immediately, wanted to know where I was always. It triggered everything. Sometimes I wonder if the lawsuit was worth it. $45,000 my mother never paid feels hollow. But then I remember Judge Fleming's opinion, the legal precedent, the messages from people who felt validated. I remember that standing up for myself taught me I have worth independent of others' approval. The answer is yes. It was worth it, not for the money, but for the message. For myself and for everyone dealing with boundary-violating parents who are told they're overreacting. I think about the younger version of me, the one who would have swallowed this violation, apologized for being upset, convinced himself he was overreacting. I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I trusted my gut. I'm glad I fought back. There's a concept called post-traumatic growth. Sometimes experiencing trauma leads to positive changes. I've experienced that. I'm stronger, more aware of boundaries, better equipped to help others. None of this means I'm glad it happened, but I'm choosing to make meaning from it. I'm still figuring out who I am without her constant surveillance. I'm still learning to trust that my thoughts are mine alone. I'm still working through the layers of anger and grief and relief, but I'm doing it on my terms, in my space, with my privacy intact. And that's worth everything. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.